In this episode of the Broken to Smoking podcast, we continue with part 2 of the interview with Jeremy Lile. Go check out episode 048 if you missed the first half of this interview.
Yeah,
right. I was going to say turtle.
Yeah.
No, I think it's engineer, get her done, go
exactly.
work. You know.
Yeah. So probably more that executing. Yeah. So
tell me about. I know DISC has a number of different angles. Like there's various organizations that have kind of grabbed DISC and turned it into their thing. Like Wiley's one.
Yeah.
I know there's another one I'm forgetting right now. But what's your take on DISC?
My honest take is I just haven't done a ton with it.
Does it have value though? Do you think
I think it does have value. I think when the places I've seen, and this is part of getting back to what I said earlier, and now I can't remember if this was pre-recording or once we started recording, but part of it is, I did talk about the shiny new object piece. Like, I think where I've seen DISC be most effective is places that have said, we're committed to a DISC framework, and we're going to be a DISC culture and organization. So I think it does help you understand a little bit about those different leadership and work styles, the communication piece a little bit. It just, to me, it wasn't, and I think part of it was just how it was presented, perhaps. The way, if people ask me about it, I say, I think it's one of those ones that if you're willing to commit to it and go deep, it can be of immense value. But if you're wanting to just do a more high level, get everybody assessed and understanding it, sometimes I think you can almost do more damage by just keeping it at that high level. So I think it's something you really want to research and make sure that it's the right fit for your culture. But I've seen it provide immense value to places.
Talk a little bit about ways you've seen, and I don't know how often your clients do this with you, but where either you've seen it overtly, where somebody comes and says blah blah blah, and you're like, dude, that's weaponizing. Like, stop, you moron.
I'm not an 8. I don't say it like that. I'm in the heart center, so I say, well, you may want to think about it. And,
That was so nice of you when you crushed your teammate, or whatever. So, So
I want to know what example you're thinking of right now.
Well, I mean, I just came back from I'm like, hey, I think that's a dumb thing you're talking about, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just that's a great, disruptor.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about like execs or principals, owners, and we're talking about a $20 million business, $50 million business, whatever, it's like, guys, if you don't figure this out, this partnership or this how to fly in formation, how to work together, all kinds of hell is going to break loose, right? And so from at least from my role, they kind of are like, dude, can you rattle my chain, please?
Yeah.
Like, can you please grab me if I'm about to fall over this cliff? Yeah. And it's a little uncomfortable. I mean, I enjoy it, but I'm also kind of freaked out sometimes by being, pretty, I don't know, punky about it.
No, but I think it is, and frankly, it's what I'm more interested in right now is like, how do we push teams in those kinds of ways? In the comfort zone, getting into from green to yellow, not pushing them all the way to red. But if you're not willing to have those hard conversations, if you're not willing to take an honest look under the hood, then this is, and again, it frustrates me because then that's where I think a lot of these assessments and different things get that, or even just our work in general gets kind of that. As one person described it, are we allowed to swear on this podcast?
Yes.
Okay, but I was in a appreciative inquiry training certification up at Case in Cleveland, and one of the participants was going through, and she said her manager, she was asking me, just how supported I felt in going through the training and stuff and certification, and I said, well, how about you? And she said, well, not at all. My manager's in a construction business, and he said, I don't understand why I have to pay for you to go through this huggy kissy bullshit. And I do think like one of my life missions is how do I pull all this stuff out of huggy kissy bullshit category, soft skills. What do you think of when you think soft? You think squishy, you think kind of negotiable, as opposed to foundational, essential skill development. And this is critical. And so can you give us permission to push you a little bit if we see a pain point? And, I always say I need a little more Enneagram 8 in me because I want to push teams a little more and say, hey, if you don't get this right, if you're not willing to be authentic and vulnerable, if you're not willing to dive into the conflict and explore it and again, demystify it and make it less about the person and more about the motivation and the performance and expression of these things, then what are we here for? Then we're just going to keep doing the same kinds of things that are getting the same kinds of results. And you brought us in to help you
That's right.
get some different results. So let's get after it and go for it. So you were asking about weaponizing. Mm-hmm. I think one of two ways. One is that label making, assumption making, just you're an 8, so I know everything about you. I know you're going to be a jerk. I know you're going to, instead of saying, hey, Mark, as an 8, how are you viewing this? Mm-hmm. What kinds of things do we need to be paying attention to? What's interesting to you? What are you curious about in this? So I think it's from that standpoint. I think the other weaponizing of it is as somebody starts to find their voice maybe, or find their place and feel permission to finally have, and this is one of the things we hear most often with some of these things is, I finally have language to describe these things. I've always known Clifton Strengths. I've always known I had these talents. I just didn't have words for it. I didn't know that getting up and in front of a group and not, shaking like a leaf was a talent. I didn't know that being able to really focus in and dial in and like push everything out and get shit done. Mm-hmm. See, now you made me swear once, so I'm going to keep swearing. But
we got a little, what do we have? A duck sound or something?
Okay, there we go.
Right, something.
For the really bad words.
Yeah, okay, all right.
I'm surprised you don't.
As you can tell, that's my favorite one, so I probably won't use some of the other ones. But anyhow, so I think it's also then as someone finds their voice and starts to find that courage to speak up, if it's not a trusting, psychologically safe environment, they do that, and then they get punished. Then they get knocked back down, and then it's like, whoa, well, wait a minute. What was the point of all that?
Sure.
I'm not speaking up again. I'm just going to keep my head down and keep plugging away. Then an issue arises. I don't say anything. It compounds and blows up in somebody's face, literally or figuratively. And everyone's saying, "Well, what happened?" Well, you didn't create a culture where people could talk about these things.
Yeah.
So.
This is a huge gap at the principal leaders on the principal leaders role.
Yeah.
And this is something I'm working on. I'm working on a book right now about, and I think it's going to be one of several about, hey, how do you be a visionary? Like, what does a day job of a visionary look like? And as I'm coaching all these visionaries and second in commands and leadership teams, around executing, I suppose, the visionary often is pretty ineffectual. They're ineffectual at a certain level, which has gotten them to where they are. But they've often misunderstood how they did that as a visionary and what they actually do.
Yeah.
And it's essentially getting people to see things, for one, and casting a vision that everybody's like, oh, we want to go there too.
Yeah.
So coming back to these assessments, if the visionary is able to cast a compelling vision and say, this place here that we're trying to head to is worth executing on. It's super valuable. If we get there, here's all of the benefits or results or truths. We're in this and I call it the land of awesome. Mm-hmm. Like, we all want to go to a place that's awesome. Okay, great.
Yeah.
And we may have different ways of describing that, but as an organization, the visionary has to say, this is what that ultimate destination looks like. That's really the root definition of a visionary, is somebody who goes, hey, there's this great place to go. This isn't it. We're not in it now. We got to get there. Do you want to get there? Yeah, I do. Do you want to get there? Yeah, I do. Well, we got to leave here. Mm-hmm. We actually have to, pack it up.
Yeah.
Like, well, dang, I like it here.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but that's better, right? And you agree and I agree. Yeah. Okay, well, it's going to be super awkward and uncomfortable and risky and, unknown and all that stuff. And they've got to paint a good enough picture where the folks that are the super essential, stable folks are like, fine, I'll mail in stability for future stability. Mm-hmm. And tying in these assessments, I think, to that, to say, look, we can't do that if we don't understand how we're made. If we don't understand what's under the hood for each of us, otherwise we'll just have, with the head games deal, we'll just constantly conflict. We'll constantly misunderstand each other.
Right.
We won't be able to be a high-performing team.
Yeah.
You can't, if you don't understand your teammate enough to function at a really high level, well, then we're just going to constantly drop the ball or drop the baton or whatever metaphor you want to use. So when I'm teeing up these kind of things, I'll say right off the bat, look, don't fall into the, what'd you call it? The squashy bullshit trap.
Yeah,
or
huggy kissy bullshit.
Yeah. Like, don't fall, like you're going to feel like that, but it's not that.
Yeah.
It's going to help you understand what's under the hood of this other teammate.
Right.
And they're going to understand you better. We're not sure what we're going to do about it just yet, but it's definitely going to be valuable information that then we need to do something with down the road. And it's going to be super important, or at least marginally important, in getting us to that land of awesome.
Well, and again, I don't know about you, but what I hear most often is I can teach the technical side. I can't teach the essential foundational side. And I think a big part of that is because perhaps we're trying to get everybody to have the same essential or foundational layer instead of saying that's going to be very diverse. So I need to know what that diversity is so that when I go to teach the technical side, it gives me some insights and perspective on how best to do that. If your Clifton Strengths are showing up in a certain way, or you're a certain Enneagram type, like I mentioned that example at the Akron Zoo earlier, I can teach you the technical side of these flowers need watered or these plants need taken care of. But if I just say, now go do it, or do it in the way that I do it, and your core motivation is creativity, you're not going to get the best out of me. So again, I think it is really important to take that time and understand those things. And
Have you ever read any Tom Peters? You know who he is? Excellence Dividend is the book I'm thinking about.
No.
He is a very well known on the kind of, I'm gonna say, like in the Jim Collins, Peter Drucker, kind of that high end consulting, like McKinsey, Bain, et cetera, those kind of like world famous folks. He's in that world. Richard Koch, the 80-20 principle, he's in that world. Well, he has a great book called The Excellence Dividend. It's a terrible audio read because it's essentially his entire PowerPoint collection. And he collects his thoughts in PowerPoints and writes little ditties or descriptors. And so as you're reading through it,
we all know there's nothing better than someone reading directly from a PowerPoint to you.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, so it's his notes on the backside of the PowerPoint, I think is what it is. And so it's like, 6.2.2.3, 6.2.2.4, but it's these little bullet points that are just super punchy.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to just pop it. And it's broken into about 12 or 13 major categories. And one of them being people and culture. And he's like, look, folks, people matter most.
Yeah.
We know that. You dummies that keep forgetting that, good luck with that.
Right.
But we've known that like since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
We've forgotten it a couple seasons and periods, but at the end of the day, we all know that the center of all this are some folks. And if you forget about that, you're just, you're swimming upstream.
Right.
And he's very like punchy about just some quips about that.
All right.
And one of them is PMM, people matter most.
Yeah.
And around these assessments, this is a great place to kind of say, if you don't understand people, you're in the leader. You're in the people business as a leader. It doesn't matter what you're making, or producing, or doing, right? Whether it's nonprofit, for-profit, institutional, whatever. You're still in the people business.
And I think this is what's really cool about a lot of the data that's coming out in the last. I always applaud our co-founders because they were kind of ahead of that curve a little bit in an environment that was a little more hostile. Now we have data to back up the fact that, what we've known all along remains true, that, people do matter. And, all the stuff that Gallup's doing around workplace well-being and that it also then those are the companies that are more productive, more, higher performing and profitable. And so I think for a while we had this false perspective of it's either or. And it's like, no, this is a both and thing. Yeah. Take care of them, do those things. And that was really where my desire to kind of step out of that full-time work in the church world and step into this space came from, was seeing my parents run that business in such a way that they took care of their people and made hard self-sacrificing decisions. I remember my dad saying, as the business grew to a couple $1 million valuation and everything, that, all his friends were telling him, you ought to buy a vacation home. You ought to get this and that and all these different things. And he said, it's stuff. It's stuff. And if all I'm doing is just focused on me, and what can I do for myself, what's the message that I'm sending to my people? So how do I give more back to the people? How do I give more back to the community and the clients? And, and he still lived a very good life and a very comfortable life and everything, and had incredible opportunities. But it was one of those rare instances where I've actually seen a leader say, I'm going to cap how much I'm going to make and take from this business, because I want to push it back down and let them. Yeah, I think oftentimes we see these let's just be honest. I'm going to make much of myself. I want to get it so that my name's on all the checks that are going out. I want it, I want my name on the building, and I'm not, squashing all of that. There's great people that sometimes those are just the perks in order to get into getting behind a passion project. But I think if we make that the ultimate goal, rather than what I saw him do was, how about if I pay my people above fairly and give them the opportunity to give back, give them the flexibility to, have some agency and choose how they're going to get involved. The impact of that then went out to their families, went out to others, and got them involved in many other things. To me, that's the part that's that's the societal impact. That's the Case Weatherhead, business as an agent of world benefit. That's the conversation I'm interested in. What is this all about? And again, how Gallup's looking at some of those things and saying, our GDP or our economic progress might be up and to the right, but our well-being is down and to the right. And is this actually making us happier? Are we actually living better lives, or in the pursuit of all these things have we missed the main point? The other thing I want to just circle back to real quick on that entrepreneurial standpoint, and just entrepreneurs, so I think it could be interesting as you're looking at that and exploring that a little bit, is to also look at that change strategy formula, D times V times P, minus R equals C equals change. So, demand for change.
Those are real. Those
are real things. I'm going to spell it out for you. D times V times P.
Okay.
Minus R. Wow. Or it's greater than R, I think is either one, equals C, or change.
Okay.
But the idea here is, the V is the visionary piece. It's casting that vision, letting people know, the benefits of this, why we need to go there. But then you've got these other aspects of the equation, the demand for change. Some people are going to be really good at highlighting that and showing why we need to do that. Probably some of the 8s and the 1s. The P is the process and the plan. How are we going to go about implementing? And then the R is the resistance to change. And so I think as a visionary, and I would say it doesn't always have to be, and I'm sure you would agree, it doesn't always have to be the senior, the CEO person. It could be, hey, I'm more of a planning and process person, but I know I need a visionary on my team to help drive some of those kinds of things. But, I think those are all things that we need to take into account, and where things like these assessments can also help us understand that some people are going to be really good at the demand side. Some people are going to be really good at the plan and process side. And some people are naturally going to be predisposed to the resistance side. And I remember that when I first came on staff at Heart to Heart, we had a board member who was an Enneagram 5, the analytical, maybe that's the word we use, is analyzer. But anyhow, more objective, analytical. So I'd get in there as a V, visionary, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to shake things up. Here's the vision for achieving all these things. And I'm all excited. And he'd start to poke at it. Well, how are we going to do that? What's the plan for it? Here's why I think that might be difficult and all these things. And I remember thinking this guy's an ass. What's going on? And so eventually I, as hopefully good leaders do, had a conversation with him and just said, hey, seems like when I'm bringing these things up, you're kind of shooting them down, and you're, what's going on? Do you not believe in that? Are you frustrated with the organization? What all's going on? He said, no, Jeremy, my mom gave the very first donation to start Heart to Heart. Wow. And I believe in this mission so much that I want to make sure we've thought through the specifics of these kinds of things. Because when you get out there outside the boardroom and start talking to other people about this vision, they're going to have similar questions to what I'm asking. So I want to make sure we've thought about those things internally. So again, I think it's that, we begin to understand we had an Enneagram 1 on our team. She was really good at that resistance piece. And for a while I thought, again, gosh, you're just shooting down my dreams. Well, no, I realized she believes in this vision, but she's got to know that we've thought through and that we have a specific plan for how we're going to get there. And, Jeremy, I think you're being a little bit, ambitious in that side, or maybe you're not being ambitious enough. And so I leaned into those, executing strengths. I leaned into that Enneagram 1 and said, okay, I need you to give me the data. I need you to show me the specifics of, the business better than anybody else from the inside out. How are we going to get there? What are the roadblocks that we need to be aware of? So again, I think sometimes as visionaries, we think if the vision in and of itself is compelling enough, all those other things will just fall into place. No, have we taken the time to really let people poke, really let people express their concerns and leverage those different strengths?
Would you put and I'm really interested in this little
I think it's like Richard Beckhard or something like that. It's like a classic change model, and then there's been other derivations.
Are you familiar with the flywheel concept from Jim Collins? It's kind of similar to this. Would you put structure in there with process, like as in, hey, okay, we got this demand. There's this need out there. Hey, we could this. Okay, cool. And here's how we're gonna do it.
Yeah.
What
are the systems and structures that are going to help us get there?
Okay.
Yeah.
Organizational model, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's really important. I don't know, to be honest with you, I don't know that the format that we use gets fully into those kinds of things. And frankly, we've had to be really careful at Heart to Heart to say, we're not your OD folks. We're not going to put the systems and structures fully in place for you. You've got to figure out what those best options are for you. But we'll point to some of those. But it is really important because I do think sometimes it's not the people, it's the system and structure in place that's prohibiting them from getting there.
Yeah. A lot of times I get asked to speak into the OD part, and I'm like, well, that's not my role either. My role is to kind of go, well, who's leading the OD function here? Right. Somebody owns that.
Yeah.
Well, it's me. All right. Well, are you the right person? Like, can we, does that fit our kind of overarching strategy? What strategy? Okay. Who owns that? Right. It's just get them to kind of like, dang, we didn't think about any of this stuff. Right. And at a very macro process, macro systems.
Yeah. Yeah. So we can highlight maybe some of those systems. We can help you begin to discern and understand where some of those pain points are coming from an OD standpoint. But, that's usually where we would look to hand you off to somebody else and say, okay, they're going to be the ones. Or say, like you said, what are those things in place already internally that you can leverage?
Yeah. Well, so if you were to sling together, and if somebody walks up and like, all right, Jeremy, tell me, just cut it to me straight, give it to me straight. I'm going to do 3 assessments. Which 3 should I do? That just kind of pair them up.
Yeah. So, again, part of that is hedging my bets here on trying to, or depending on the person and what they're looking for. If it's an individual, I think I would say Enneagram, Clifton Strengths, and then another one that we use oftentimes is the Leadership Circle Profile. Another great, it's more of a 360 assessment. You do a self-assessment on kind of where you see yourself in a variety of leadership competencies, and then you invite 12 to 20 others in. So it's a very vulnerable experience where you're saying, hey, I want you to be honest about how you're experiencing my leadership and the ways that measures you on kind of.
What does that look like? So somebody's going, okay, check. This sounds like that's not an online assessment, right?
You actually do. You don't go on and just take it yourself, but we're certified in that, and then can kind of open up the portal to you. But yeah, you actually do go online and you fill it out for yourself. And I think again it's 120 or 140 questions. We like these more in-depth ones because we think they're just more realistic. Tons of research behind it. I think it's Bob Anderson and Bill Adams, Mastering Effective Leadership, like just gurus around this stuff. The Full Circle Leadership used to be the name of the organization, but I think they've just moved to Leadership Circle Group. But anyhow, so very, very research-based. You would want to go through a certified, someone who's certified in the LCP. You take that, but then you invite, like I said, ideally 12 to 20 others kind of at varying levels of your organization. So if you're the CEO, peers or other C-suite folks. If you're not, then you might invite a boss and a boss's boss. There's categories for that. You are going to invite peers. You're going to invite, I think the language they use is subordinate, but right now I'm not remembering exactly correctly. But yeah, those who direct reports, I think is better language.
So it sounds like this might be.
And then also there's like an other category. So, hey, I might also want to throw
Grandma.
my partner in that, or my closest friend, and just see, hey, how do they experience that?
Is this for a little bit bigger organization, like some maybe 50 to 100 or?
So it can be, but also we have individuals who sometimes we use it mostly within our purposeful leadership program. So as I think I mentioned that earlier, you're going to get 6 full program days, but then you're also going to get 6 hours of one-on-one coaching based on that leadership circle profile, and it maps onto the content that you're learning throughout the sessions. But we also have individuals who just come to us and say, hey, I'm thinking right now, one's a smaller nonprofit, but they had someone that they said, hey, we really want to, they're having some leadership issues. We want to kind of assess where they're at and then provide some coaching for them. So it can be kind of a one-off type of thing. But ideally, I think it's either in, the setting of like a program like our purposeful leadership, or within an organization where a whole team kind of takes it and then even looks at, sometimes you can do a team assessment and say, okay, here's how we are individually, but then as a team, we're incredibly task oriented and not as much relationship oriented. It also measures you on both your reactive and creative competencies. So there's a philosophy in that says when you're leading out of pure ego, these things serve you. I can still be driven and get a lot done, but what are the unintended consequences? And that's one of my favorite conversations right now with leaders is, what are the unintended consequences of your leadership? Yeah, that drivenness may serve you, but if you look behind the bus, what's piling up behind you? What are you leaving behind? As opposed to if you move that reactive tendency of drivenness into the creative side of, systems thinker, results oriented. It says, hey, it's similar competency, but now it's serving me in a more creative kind of way, and it gives suggestions of, if you score low in that, here's some things you could try, and also the coaching kind of lets you pick a couple of those things. Interestingly, I think one of the biggest areas they measure in authenticity, which gets broken out into integrity and courageous authenticity, and so that you kind of have this inner circle, and then you have an outer circle that blows some of these things up. So authenticity is the big piece of the pie. Then you slice up that piece into integrity and courageous authenticity. But that's the area where we see people landing the most. How do I show up authentically? How do I stand on my own 2 feet and really express my leadership in an impactful kind of way? And so to me, I think that's what it really comes down to when we think about who this podcast is geared toward, those senior level, principal, C-suite kinds of folks, is that awareness piece, that leadership presence piece. How am I showing up? And do people feel like they can be really honest with me? Because I'll have sometimes leaders say, like, yeah, things are great, and then you start to talk to the people and you're like, I don't know, that'd be the opinion of people. So I love a profile like or assessment like the leadership circle profile, that it says, here's what you think, here's what others think. There's a gap between those things. Sometimes it's someone thinking way less of themselves, but other times it's more that ego side of, I'm thinking much more of myself. And so, okay, what might that gap tell us about your leadership effectiveness? And if we could close that gap, how could you be that much more effective? And actually that assessment measures your leadership effectiveness too. So good stuff. So I think ideally I would give them all 3 of those. I'd say Enneagram, Clifton Strengths, and leadership circle profile, while also admitting that there's bias in that I haven't spent a lot of time with predictive index, culture index. You were telling me earlier about Colby and some of these other ones. So I think there's, again, to me, it would be pick some and stick with them and at least try them out, not in a dogmatic kind of way that if they're not working, you don't abandon them, but at least give them enough time to kind of really run a full cycle in your organization.
We had Alec Broadfoot on Vision Spark. He's a, what do you call it? A staffing expert. They find, they attract, find, vet, very specifically leadership team people.
Okay.
For small to medium privately held businesses primarily, but he said that they have found from at least from their data that when a team comes in with assessments, that there's a triple the effectiveness of their putting the right person in the right seat initially.
Yeah.
So they have I think he said something like it was 18%, success rate. So when you hire a person, basically 4/5 of the time, the person doesn't work out.
Wow.
And then when you use any assessments, he said just any.
Really?
It really doesn't matter which ones.
Yeah.
From his perspective. He has some that he really likes. He has one that's the Achiever test, which is kind of I think it's a little more industry specific for search firms.
Okay.
And that sort of thing. But anyway, when you use them, then it goes up to I think it's 52% from 17 to 50 or whatever, 20 to 50. Which is wow, that's
I'd like
that is
to see
a
that
major shift.
Yeah.
So, and I think it revolves around just they have more meaningful conversations about the role, more meaningful conversations about attributes, more meaningful conversations about, gee, is this really all that? Is this your sweet spot? Here's what the thing is, and what are you good at? And I think was it him who said, well, I'm looking at you. You weren't here when we did it, Shane. You were on vacation.
Yeah, but I edited it.
You edited it. That's right.
So I listened to it many times.
Yes, you listened to it more than I did.
Yeah.
Right? So it's, just that they're, folks are bad at interviewing and recruiting and so forth. And so on. So
I think to that point too, though, of I think sometimes maybe we think we're looking for that perfect hire or that, and why I said I think sometimes you have to be careful with assessing before the hire. But if you do it afterwards, if it has a good feel to it and you have some more of those kind of qualitative kinds of things of just, is this someone that I could actually see myself working well with? And do they have some of that, kind of dynamic? Yeah. Then the assessments do allow you to craft a little bit, to even do, one of the things I'm hearing more and more about is stay interviews and just say, what's really energizing you in your work? What's depleting your energy? What are the things you most enjoy? What are the things you least enjoy? And so to say, you may hire somebody for a specific task, but they can get that done. But if they're wanting, let's just say they're more in the executing domain on Clifton Strengths, you hired them more for the executing domain. I need you to accomplish these specific tasks, but a lot of their strengths are in that relationship building. Well, again, how do we create some opportunities for them to experience that? We find that a lot at Heart to Heart of there's really only a number of us who go out and do the direct facilitation. Our board, because it's such a, really, and we have participants, not our own language, but participants say, it's kind of a sacred space. We create a field where people show up and can really be their authentic selves and let their guard down. So if you let a board member or an outside observer come in, it kind of changes the dynamic. Oh, somebody's kind of observing us. I don't know if I want to let my guard down quite as much. Whereas, but how do we create then those touch points for our board members, for team members that maybe are kind of more behind the scenes? And I think similarly to understand, we had one person who was really far in the executing and she was okay with just tell me what I need to do. Let me get my job done. Celebrate and reward and appreciate what I'm doing and help me see how it connects to the broader mission. But I don't need to go to every event that's happening in the community. Whereas others might say, I want to get that task done and I find fulfillment in that. And I want to find some connection. I want to experience maybe a program. If we do a community program, can I attend and those kinds of things? So again, I think it just gives us some of that texture and nuance that allows us to be more curious and explore those things with our employees and with those that we're leading. So you'll have to, I'd love to see that information because that would be really helpful to share with people.
He'd be a great guy for you to.
What did you say? Alec Broadfoot?
Alec Broadfoot. He's down in Columbus. We'll connect you up, but I've known him for a while, done some work with him.
Yeah. My problem is every time I talk to you, I come away with more books to read and, more people to connect with. And
That's a problem, huh?
yeah,
Yes.
if you saw my bookshelf and the
I get
list
it.
of unread books, you'd know why.
I get it.
No, but I love it because it
Yeah.
does expand those horizons.
Dude, the audio has made all of this. 90% of my reading is accomplished because of audio, at least, or 3/4.
Yeah.
I mean, it's as a significant majority. So
Okay. Yeah. See, I have like a 8-minute commute to work. And
yes,
Just
it's one of the things I like about my half-hour commute. It's right on the edge of it's almost a little long, but it's just right. Mm-hmm. So
yeah.
For that purpose, I'm reading right now that Adam Grant, Think Again.
Okay.
Somebody has been telling me, a client has been telling me for like a year to read this thing. I finally got around to it.
So I think you and I talked about this of like my rule has become, unless I hear about it from 2 or 3 people, like if just one person recommends it, I'll write it down. But then if I start to hear about it, like from multiple people who I trust and respect, then it's like, okay, now I think it's worth adding to the pile and knowing that I'll probably read the first, 80 pages and then lose interest and move on.
So how would you suggest, and I know this isn't easy to answer. I don't know how to answer this either. That's why I'm asking you if you get
It's
any
a great
ideas.
setup.
But as I've been doing these episodes lately around assessments and then looking at clients through that lens a little more intensely lately, this whole idea of character, this whole idea of, your, I don't know, guiding principles, if you will, or your, personal core values, perhaps, or, this is a Ray Dalio statement is, what are your guiding principles? And as he's talking about it, it is character, but it's also around, why are you trying to grow wealth or trying to be substantial person, for what reason, what is it that's and also what are your guiding principles, maybe strategically, that helps you to decide whether or not you're going to do, a certain event or certain maybe investment or maybe endeavor. And as I ask people this, I just came back from a weekend with 3 different clients, back to back, not a weekend, 5-day trip, 6-day trip.
Okay.
And each of them had a different set of guiding principles. 3 totally different companies, all in the tens of millions of revenue, significant leadership roles, significant moving parts in the business, and they all have, as principals or owners or founders, really different reasons personally to be growing these businesses or leading these businesses. And sometimes, and I try to vet a client a little bit if I can, and try to understand, what's driving them, and if they're, I don't know, icky, or if they're like money, it's like I'm not your guy.
That's the other song we can play.
Yeah, there you go.
Money.
There you go.
Sorry,
I
should not subject your audience to hearing me sing. I cannot carry a tune.
And I'm a card-carrying member of the Brotherhood of Alpha Delta. So, you say that, start singing. I'm like, oh, what song? Squirrel. Off I go on that tangent. So, but yeah, have you seen any character like hacks in interviewing? Like, I mean, of course, checking references is kind of the old-fashioned one. And that's a big one.
There's a reason why it
top grading.
stays.
It's like, hey, you got to talk about, hey, we're going to check your references, buddy. We need some good ones, and we're going to call them.
Yeah.
So that's a good one. But what about other ones?
I think part of what you talked about is you as an individual and the organization. What are, and I kind of like that language of guiding principles rather than core values. Doesn't really matter. It's down to semantics. But I think sometimes core values can feel a little bit like, these are my core values, or we do an exercise where we have you write down your core values and your kind of personal purpose or mission statement. And I would say, write it in pencil. This isn't something that has to be etched in stone forever. These will be my values, or this will be my personal mission, or even the organizational mission statement. Those things adapt and change. But I think it's really knowing the organizational side of those things. So what are those guiding principles that are going to direct and give that you're all about? And then I think you can interview to those things to say, tell me a little bit about your guiding principles and your core values. And as you do that, then you can begin to look at, is there alignment here? You know, if we're all about, curiosity, and this person is saying that mine is about certainty or something, well, maybe this isn't going to be the best match, or you at least gives you something to kind of base it on. So I do think really being clear about your own personal guiding principles and about those guiding principles / core values of the organization give you something to kind of measure against. And then I do think sometimes asking for specific examples too as you're interviewing. Tell me about a time, using that appreciative inquiry approach, if you will. I guess I'm certified in that, so I'm kind of biased toward that again as well. But think of a time when, or tell me about a time when, you had to make a tough decision that maybe kind of highlights how they would navigate a situation where those core values get. I think there's a TED Talk titled something along the lines of doing core values. Yeah, it's one thing to have them, as we talked about earlier, written out, but it's another thing to really do them. And as you mentioned, our buddy Josh over at FSM earlier, but like I know they've really built things around one to say, and I think of also someone, Rita Boswell over at Environmental Design Group, who said, this whole idea of, and I can't remember where she got it from, but was talking to me about, if you say we have a unique culture, everybody says they have a unique culture. Tell me exactly what it is. How does that get lived out when push comes to shove and we're at each other's throats? What are the things that are going to anchor us in that? So again, I think you can give people a scenario-based kind of thing that says, tell me about a time when you lived out one of those guiding principles, or when one of those was tested, or how would you handle a situation like this? So I think that's another way to do that. And I think I had a squirrel moment where I moved away from Josh Gordon, but what I know they've done is they've created these really, I think like curiosity is one of their core values. And I love it in and of itself makes you wonder what it's about. Sure. So it allows you to define it a little bit, and then they also reward it. And I think they give little, gift certificates and things like that, which I also think is really interesting. Gallup just released some stuff on, celebrating people's strengths once a week. Don't just wait till that year end kind of thing, but give those encouragements along the way. So how do we bake those things? Sure. So anyhow, that's where I think some of the character piece comes in addition to the references, in addition to, really knowing your own guiding principles and core values is giving some scenario-based kinds of things.
I like the Lencioni's ideal team player has that's a kind of an easy way to pop the lid on character, because he's got, what is it? I'm drawing a blank now what the three are. But it's kind of around these head, heart, mind. And also Angela Duckworth talks about them. They're the kind of, could be kind of around cognitive, and affective, perhaps, or will, character of the will, character of the intellect, and character of the heart, I think is how she breaks it up.
Okay. Tell me a little bit more about that. I'm not familiar with that language.
Well, so in these are
helpful. Maybe people have heard about that, but
they're psychological kind of, in the psychology world, in your, I don't know, maybe in your psyche, or in the way you process, and in the processing kind of makeup of a human. So it's not just your brain. It's kind of the collection of your kind of conscious self. Here's how you process intellectually. Here's how you process, or here's how you execute a process. That'd be cognitive, IQ, that sort of thing. Affective, like how do you sensory, how do you feel, how do you process emotionally, and then the cognitive is how do you kind of execute, how do you kind of get things done. Anyway, so in Ideal Team Player, he's got a bunch of interview questions. And this kind of, what is that? The Venn diagram is the format. And you go around and answer It basically he gives you find people that have evidence of all three of these values.
Okay.
And then if there's just one, he says, well, this is what this kind of person is. And I'm like, oh, shoot. And if there are two, it's something also bad. Like one was the skillful politician. Can you look them up?
Yeah, I got to look it up.
The three, because that would really help this conversation. But
I didn't know we could have Shane doing research for us. I could have been,
there you go.
What did I say about that Enneagram test?
Yeah. So and there's a number of, like I said, like 2 or 3 pages of interesting interview questions.
Okay.
And
that's a separate book?
Ideal Team Player.
Okay, yeah.
That's what it's called. It came out a few books before that other one.
Yeah.
The one I can never remember.
5 Dysfunctions?
No, the
Working
6.
Genius?
Yes,
Yeah.
that one.
Okay.
I can never remember that title.
Yeah.
So I was at a Lencioni conference and met him actually in 2020, February or March of 2020.
Probably not March, unless it was early March.
It was like we thought it was going to get canceled.
Okay.
It was like March 9th or something. I mean, we all have this like big black line.
That event is ground zero of
right.
the spread.
And we were in the gray zone. And it was in Texas. It was at the Gaylord in Dallas. This place was so big.
Yeah, I've been there, I think.
Yeah, it was
Is that
so
in
big.
Plano? Is that like a little bit outside of Dallas?
Outside of Dallas.
Yeah.
It's so big, I got lost trying to check in. I mean, I'm walking around with my suitcase going, I must have missed something. Because there's these little towns and these creeks. It's all indoors, And I'm like, man, am I in like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory or something? I'm like, I'm just trying to check in. Like, it's big if you miss the front desk, Like, for crying out loud. So,
but it is Texas. Everything's bigger in Texas, right?
Yeah. Were you talking about humble, hungry, smart?
That's it. Humble,
okay.
hungry, and smart.
Yes.
That's right.
Okay, I am familiar with that.
So it's a Venn diagram, right? And so if you're humble, if
And
you're
only
just
humble.
only humble,
That's the pawn.
yeah, you're a pawn, right? It's really it's fabulous. It's
If
super
you're
easy.
Only hungry, that's the bulldozer,
Okay. And if you're only smart,
the charmer.
okay. And then if you're, give me the 2 then. So humble and hungry.
It didn't put it on this one.
There's a crossover.
Yeah, here it is. Okay, here we go. Humble and hungry is the accidental mess maker.
I also just realized, like, I should have had Shane answer everything for me because he's got a great voice.
It's this mic.
Yeah, man.
This is a really cool mic.
Okay.
Hungry and smart, you're the skillful politician. That's what you're talking about.
Okay.
Yes.
And then smart and humble is the lovable slacker. That's me.
Yeah.
This is great. That's me.
Oh yeah. Should we talk about that later?
Yeah, well, we have a little.
I'll just kind of Homer Simpson into the shrubs here and let you guys.
His
hash this out.
3-year review's coming up here.
Ruh-roh.
We skipped the first and the second one.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
There are other things.
So there you go.
Yeah. Okay.
That's
That's
It's
helpful.
really interesting. Yeah.
And there's a lot of great downloads. It's super easy. An entrepreneur just grab and go. It's high speed, low drag.
Yep. And I love that kind of stuff where it's, hey, how do we plug this in very easily? I was just talking to someone this morning. They're going to be working with me on some facilitation. They've done some stuff through Giant Worldwide. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but some things around communication and just, you're more collaborative. Are you more competitive? Well, maybe that's not the right C, but there's 5 C's or something. It's like, again, how do we simplay some of these things and just, I like that. Grab and go and apply it in any situation and circumstance. So.
Well, so when I was at this conference, and he had the executive team from Southwest Airlines.
Oh, yeah.
He had Alan Mullally, who used to run Ford.
Okay.
He had the Los Angeles Rams, is it? The football team, their head coach. These are all clients of his.
Okay.
And he had, who else did he have? A couple other people I'm drawing a blank on. But one of the things he talked about was interviewing. And he gave a couple examples of how he accidentally interviewed somebody for his organization and one for his wife, I think, has some nonprofit that needed a, significant person, and his wife's like, will you interview this person? And something came up, and he had to fly across country for something, I don't know what. And he's like, well, would you come along with me? I got to do this trip. It's going to be a 2-day thing. It's kind of like, otherwise I can't help you, or we can't do this thing. So this person came along.
The person that they're interviewing.
Yeah. Just like, hey.
Let's just be clear. I don't know that I would say that's a great, general policy, but
right.
yeah, in this case,
yeah.
okay.
And like the whole trip like fell apart. It was one of those deals where flights got missed. They had to hit hotels that they didn't plan on, and all this sort of thing. And he said, man, all this character came out, or lack of character that came out. They looked great on paper, and in, experience and all that stuff. But he's like, we never would have known any of these little kind of glitchy spots.
Yeah.
So he was like, look, dude, another thing he said is find out all kind of other weird ways to interview, like go to so he was coaching his son's little league team, and he needed to do an interview with somebody. Yeah. And he's like, well, come on with me. and he just he would take people, and he's
I love it. That's what I was thinking, like, when I mentioned earlier the security check at the airport, like maybe that's the best place to do an interview, see how they react to. Although I probably wouldn't have gotten any of the jobs I've gotten, so maybe not. But
you'd be amazed at how many people interview from a pool of one, where they're just like, look, we're gonna, or they don't do any background checks, they don't any reference checks of any sort. No, just nothing.
Yeah.
They're just straight up, so I used to be.
I remember doing that with someone, and I called one of the references, and she was young, and we were kind of like, hey, are we taking a risk on this person? And he was like, get this person. She is a rock star. You will not regret. I've worked with her. It was like, okay, that's all right.
Yeah. That was one of my big takeaways from top grading. Top grading is an impossible read, but I did it somehow. It was through Audible. Right?
Okay.
So it took me
2.5 times.
It was about
let's see, or something.
it was like it was a 1,300-mile read.
There you go. Okay,
it's probably more than that actually. Now I think about it, but the thing is like 800 pages. It's ridiculous.
Okay. I don't think it's that bad, but it's a lot.
Brad Smart, did you read? You read part of it or all of it? I can't remember.
Yeah, it's not 800, but
it's not. It felt like it.
Yeah.
So don't burst my bubble.
I looked it up one time when you said that.
Yeah.
It was 120 pages.
It's like 760 or something.
Oh, God. So Shane's a 1, on the, whatever, Enneagram. So there's
matters.
2 big takeaways. And one was do your research, like actually call their references, And all the HR people in the world, every time I try to pitch this, I have a little hack for recruiting that I call the Recruiting Flywheel, right? So these 5 steps on the flywheel. And it all starts with culture. And we're talking about culture, and this is from Lencioni and from Southwest Airlines, a couple others. Or we're not even talking about the job. Hey, we're assuming you can do the job, and you're assuming you would like doing this job. Okay, so let's just start with that. Yep. And then you go through culture, like the first 4 steps. But in one of the steps, you're going, hey, we need to talk to the people who know you. And there's this you got to do this little side thing. And Alec Broadfoot does this, and it skirts, or it becomes HR compliant, if you will. All the HR folks in the room always are like calling bullshit every time, like, and they go off. I'm like, no, I know, get it. So before I pitch the thing, I'm like, HR, raise your hand. You're not gonna like this. Okay. Just plug your ears or something. This isn't your gig anyway. And a lot of times HR gets saddled with recruiting,
right?
And it needs to go to, in some ways, to the visionary, where they're going, it's my job to attract people to this organization. Yeah. If we have this great, mission, then go get some people that want to be with us. Right. Go. How often are you out in the community talking about where we're going? A lot of times, day job of visionary, like they don't know. They're like, really? I thought I was going to help solve problems. Like, no, go cast the vision. Yeah. And that will make people come to us, hopefully. Then we can HR them and stuff. But anyway, it's that thread of reference checks. But the Alec Broadfoot says, and Brad Smart says, the way you do this is you have the candidate get a hold of their former bosses. Mm-hmm. You're not doing it. They're doing it.
Oh,
the candidate's doing it.
Okay.
And the candidate's going, hey, boss, former boss, are you willing, or I give you permission. Like, here's their number. They actually connect them together.
Yeah.
So it's overt, it's permission-based, and then it's not like, yes, we're affirming, former employment.
Yeah.
Which is the legal part.
Right.
And you're not talking to their HR person. You're talking to their manager.
Yeah.
Whomever that may be. Mm-hmm. And the truth around A players, and he defines A players in top grading, and A players are free, by the way. All A players are free.
Say more about that.
So
they're free. They
bring tremendous value to the organization. B players and C players have a cost. They cost you something. A players bring tremendous return on investment.
Okay, got it.
You see what I'm saying? So their paycheck is irrelevant.
Yeah.
And he defines A players.
Humble, hungry, and smart.
That's right. Yeah. Well, that's right. And they fit, and they're and he defines it like as in your marketplace, top 10% performers in this role in your marketplace, at a given pay grade in this region or in this slice of the market or whatever. And then one of the things he says that's always true about Abe, and this is all a bunch of data stuff from Brad Smart, is that A players' former bosses really wish these people were still working for them.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And he's like, that's why you want to call them up
and
find out. Like, and if they're like, yeah, good luck with that guy.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. And anyway, it's hard for these entrepreneurs to figure out how to create a process and execute around these ideas.
Yeah.
But anyway,
we just had a similar experience where it wasn't a hiring situation, but something we were looking at or references and trying to vet between a couple different vendors and those references were crucial and there was one that stood out as, hey, we've utilized their services and we've continued to utilize, and there were others that were said we started to utilize and we didn't finish the process. And to me, that was a huge red flag. So again, if that person, and that was kind of that person I mentioned earlier that we ended up hiring was, that person's like, I wish I had her still and 25 more of hers.
Yeah,
so,
right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah,
awesome.
Interesting. So tell me about and I love asking this question specifically, and I teed you up on this. Usually I don't.
Oh, okay.
And by the way, since you're a ecumenical brother, I had an interview. Wasn't an interview. It was, and I said this. I think I was talking to David Quick about this. I think or something. But anyway,
about what?
Top 5 books. Desert Island books.
Okay.
So I was on a 2-day annual offsite meeting with the team.
Okay.
And had worked all day, got to dinner time. We're having dinner, afterwards at some place. And there was a potential C-suite hire that the visionary decided, wouldn't it be great if this person showed up since we're all together and it's kind of relaxed, and they'd gone through a couple
the rum
interviews.
is flowing.
And, yep, sure. And so, I'm like, well, I don't know. I guess that's fine. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
It sounds great to me, boss. I mean, sure. Yeah. So this individual shows up, and the team proceeds to talk with him. We have 2-hour conversation around dinner. And I'm just kind of, doing the ping pong head, and it's, it's all around industry stuff. And do you know this guy or that guy? Remember this folks or that folks or this software, that software. And I'm super bored, and tired because I've literally given it my all.
Right.
And I gave it the office, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's like 8:00 at this time. And I've been going since 6 a.m.
Yep.
I got to go hit the hotel, get up and do it all again the next day and really bring my A game, right?
Yep.
And I'm just like, man, guys, can we change the subject, please? Like, I'm so tired of talking about this industry.
Technical, stuff that's...
And I'm like, I got a question. Can I... and just kind of just took a whole left turn on the conversation. And I think they were ready to anyway, and this was my...
Somebody please save us from this.
And this was my 8 coming out. I'm like, well, here, I'll do it. And just yank the steering wheel. Yeah, so I'm like, hey, dude, what's your 5 favorite books if you're going to go on a desert island deal? And that's my conversation starter, and it always goes somewhere interesting. And he's like, some business, like literally said, some business guy that he wrote 4 or 5 books. I would take 4 of his books. I'm thinking, forever on a desert island? Are you serious? Like, this isn't, like, what would you need them for? Right?
Well, I did
What
think
enterprise
about
are you starting?
I mean, you know, for the rest of my life, I want to be thinking about business stuff. Like, why? Like, it's over, dude. You know?
Okay, good. I feel better about my list then.
Yeah. And then he goes, and I'd take the Old Testament.
Yeah.
I'm like, Old Testament. And I'm like, in my mind, like the wheels start. I'm like, why did he say Old Testament?
Yeah.
Why didn't he say the Bible?
Yeah.
Why didn't he say the whole? And then wait, maybe it's not the whole. Maybe he's Jewish, and he would. And then no, he wouldn't say the Old Testament if he's Jewish.
Yeah. Right.
You know, he'd say the Torah, right? Like, what the heck? I'm like, something's up here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, hey, can I do a follow up?
He just loves Leviticus.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Mark's got to poke
like,
at it.
I'm like, really? Leviticus or something? And so I'm like, which part of the Old Testament, you know? And I even threw on the table, like, I really love Proverbs.
Yeah.
And if I were to take one chunk of the Bible, I would take Proverbs.
Yeah.
You know, if I could only take one.
That's
a great question.
Yeah,
It's a great question.
One book. Yeah.
And I've thought about it. I'm like, yeah, Proverbs all day. Boom. I'm like, so I'd take Proverbs. What would you take?
Yeah.
He's like, dude, the book of Mark. I'm like, whoa, what is going on here? And I'm like, we have just entered another territory, you know? And I'm like pumping the brakes and trying to hit reverse. I'm like, okay, guys, like,
We should clarify for the listeners, you know, that's the New Testament.
Mark
Yeah.
is in the New Testament.
not in the Old Testament.
Not in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Well, and it sounded so smart right up until that point. It sounded so kind of like intellectual or, you know.
And what was the reaction around the room?
They looked at me and they looked at him. And these are not, you know, these folks are not, you know, church-going folks.
Yeah.
I would say, although they have some history.
Okay.
And even
enough basic knowledge to know
Got
the
some
difference
context.
between.
And so the next day, the visionary's
Where
like,
Mark falls.
He's like, I'm no angel, but even I know, you know. I mean, he goes to church like twice a year.
Yeah.
To a
C&E, right? Yeah. Christmas and Easter.
That's right, C&E, and it's a very, I would say, very groovy, new agey kind of, which is, you know, whatever. I'm not, you know, saying anything about that, but even he knew that it wasn't in the Old Testament, and so it created this significant conversation around the candidate, and it was really interesting. And they're like, "How did you know to ask that?" Like, I didn't. I was just goofing around. I mean, I literally was bored, tired, discouraged, or not discouraged, but just ready to, like, can we just end this?
Get back to my
Come
room
on,
and get ready for
can we talk about something interesting?
So how did he, I mean, did you press him on that and say like,
Well, we all
New
kind of,
Testament.
we got to this place. I didn't
record
ask
scratched
him
and
about the New
yeah,
Testament,
okay.
Old Testament thing. It was just, it became real clear real fast that he didn't know what he's talking about.
yeah, okay, you're BSing
And,
us.
Yep, and we all were like, hey, we should change the subject now. You know, just for,
Although I feel like that's like a really risky,
yeah.
you know, like if I'm going to fake something, I'm probably not going to throw the Bible out there.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to throw like just, you know, some random
Yeah,
book or something.
moon rocks or
Yeah,
something that
exactly.
nobody knows about. When I was driving on the moon,
Right, yeah. That's a pretty easy one to, you know. So yes.
your 5 desert
5 books.
island.
Okay,
books.
so you were
All
generous to me and let me tee this up a little bit and think about it, because I did have to think about it, and it was one of those like, yeah, we're talking about leadership, so I should talk about leadership books. But then I got to thinking like, yeah, but would I care about leadership if I'm on a deserted island?
That's
and you know, what are which I probably should have thought more about, like survival guides and things like that. And but I guess more in the sense of like, I love to read broadly, although I don't read a lot of fiction, but I read broadly as far as subject matter goes. And I think that's a great, you know, attribute of a leader. I think about my dad oftentimes. He didn't have anything more than a high school education, but his bookshelves were stocked with reading broadly and just different perspectives and all that. So he continued his education in his own kind of way. But, so for me, it was more like, since I read broadly and I don't tend to read books twice, what are books that I've like gone back to a ton of times? I mark my books up. I can't get into digital readers. That's where I struggle with the audio books, because I'm like, I want to mark it up. I want to put stars and questions and underline and all those different things. So one that I've read several times that I think was really a game changer for me was a book titled Surprised by Hope. So you're going to see a little bit of my theological education in here. Surprised by Hope by N.T. Wright. And I think he just casts in that a vision of the future, and from my Christian perspective, vision of what heaven is actually about, and that it's about bringing the best of who and what we are now into that, rather than kind of this janky, here's your harp and go sit on a cloud and play that for eternity and be bored. And, to me, I guess maybe that's the Enneagram 3 in me, but I'm like, does hell have a work assignment or something? Maybe kidding. But anyhow, so I think he just casts such a beautiful vision of what that future looks like, and like bringing the best of humanity and our purpose and our co-creation, and how the very work that we do now impacts that. And is a signpost and a foretaste of that, and just frames it up how we've gotten it all wrong. Kind of, I think the subtitle is something like Rethinking Heaven and something. But, kind of, I like those disruptor kinds of things that make us rethink things. Kind of in that vein, saying in that theological vein, Kingdom Calling by Amy Sherman was another one of those books that helped me really realize, and frankly was part of what drew me out of the full-time work in the church, to say, and I was in an interim period between working in the church, doing some community development and all that, and then starting Heart to Heart, part of a national organization called Made to Flourish, and their tagline was closing the Sunday to Monday gap, and so part of her thing in there is this idea of, and I love the language of vocational stewardship. So what is my sense of vocation, and how am I stewarding that? Let's revisit that. Let's come back to that. Let's analyze and assess. I was just listening to Adam Grant's, one of his podcasts today, where he interviewed one of his former mentors, and they were talking about the projects that we work on, and just, all these different things that kind of play into that. But this idea of like, I'm stewarding, in my worldview, a relationship with God. I'm stewarding my relationship with my wife and my children. I'm stewarding my relationship at work. I'm stewarding my relationship with my community and the broader world. Let me be really intentional about kind of those four categories, and what am I doing intentionally in each of those to be as the organization that funded my seminary education, that they Generac power generators was their thing. Waukesha, Wisconsin, Sure. But their whole thing was kind of, I think it's 1 Corinthians 4:1. I've always been bad at references, but think of us in this way as servants and stewards of God's mysteries. So again, that language of stewardship, like how do we, if we think about all is gift, life is a gift, how are we stewarding those kinds of things? And Amy Sherman says, if you're lucky and fortunate and privileged enough, it could be through your day-to-day work. But if it's not, then how do we find other ways to creatively engage and say, sometimes it might be in spite of your work. It might be, hey, this is what's paying the bills, but here's some other ways that I can give back and find meaning and purpose and get involved and engaged. And so I think it's very intellectual and just frames it up in a broader context, and kind of flows from that kingdom vision that N.T. Wright gives. Another disruptive book for me was The Prophetic Imagination by Walter Brueggemann. And to me, that was the book when I was actually going through seminary, taking a class on the Old Testament prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, not Mark, that's the New Testament. But realizing that it wasn't, I think sometimes when we hear the word prophetic, we think like apocalyptic or these future predictions and all that. And it was like, no, you're frickin' selling people for a pair of sandals. You want to lay on ivory beds and you're oppressing your people. And so it brought it into this very like social justice, real tangible aspect for me to say the prophetic imagination envisions a different future and challenges people to live into that and calls people into something better and different and says, you may think this is success. You may think this is benefit and blessing. Let me flip that on its head and show you the underbelly of this, of who's being impacted by that. So that took me into a lot of interesting exploration and discovery around just wanting to understand diverse perspectives. And again, I think sometimes how the diversity, equity, inclusion has gotten really politicized, but to say, how do I listen to those marginalized voices? How do I put myself in places where I'm in the minority as a cisgendered white male that easily could just traffic in spaces where I am the majority voice, and got me really involved in anti-trafficking work and just, a broader understanding and knowledge of the bigger impact of the choices that we make on a day-to-day basis. And, I may say this thing looks really good on the outside, but what's the gross underbelly of that and the impact that has on people? So again, the prophetic imagination just really helped me explore those things in a unique kind of way and made it more practical and applicable than just this kind of, the prophet is the person who says, thus saith God in the year 2472, or even, the year 1999, the world's going to end, and, oh shoot, it didn't end, so let's readjust those calculations. But said, no, there's a justice piece to this, and really framed it up in a more, intangible way for me. I would then say, getting back to that character piece, David Brooks, The Road to Character. Have you read that one? You familiar with that?
Is he the journalist?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So really fascinating guy, and
I've heard him on NPR years ago.
Mm-hmm. And the concept that he talks in there is eulogy virtues versus resume virtues.
Yes.
Okay. So
I've heard him talk about that.
Yeah, and then he's written another book titled The Second Mountain, but it's, he's really looking at these bigger picture kinds of things to say, there may be a season of life where we are trying to build those resume virtues, and that's okay. And let's just be honest about that rather than trying to pretend that we're not doing that. But if we can
what's the name of that book?
The Road to Character. So if we can keep those eulogy virtues, and one of the things I didn't talk about is, and a big motivator for me is, my father passed away. So incredible entrepreneur, impactful guy, great example, husband, father, mentor, leader, entrepreneur, but passed away from colon cancer at age 49. And so to me, sitting here at 42, almost 43, to me it says, hey, I'm not guaranteed tomorrow. Right. So instead of waiting until someday I'll focus on character, someday I'll focus on those eulogy virtues, like 16 people begged to eulogize him at age 49. He had that kind of effect and impact. And it wasn't because he held prominent titles. It wasn't because he made much of himself. It was because Starbucks was his second office. He sat and met with people one-on-one, mentored, coached, listened to them, supported them, and helped them succeed. And, his employees, but also, he had Starbucks baristas showing up at his funeral and saying, this man made a difference in my life. So to me, it's like,
wow.
And maybe that's part of that belief strength as well. But like, how do I, and even the books that I'm mentioning, are kind of more future vision. What are we ultimately aiming at? Because I think we have to get that straight, or else the buttons on our shirts, the buttons of our lives are going to be misaligned and kind of look kind of janky. So if I'm aiming toward this thing, then I can backfill and say, what are the things that are going to direct me and guide me toward that? And then the last book I would say, because I think it forces you to do a bit more of that introspection, even though it is more of a leadership development book, but Leadership from the Inside Out by Kevin Cashman. It's one of the books we use as part of our Leadership from Within series, and I take groups through it all the time, but I read through the book every single time just because it's good reminders to me of 8 areas of kind of leadership mastery, as he describes them, and just they're kind of timeless principles. They're these things that we've talked about that, like, as creative and as inventive as we try to be and dress it all up and make it look, sexy and flashy, like, these things still, the people matter, the ability to know our purpose and core values, the ability to be resilient, to have some of that interpersonal dynamic, to coach ourselves and coach others, to know our story. That's actually one of the chapters he added in the 3rd edition was story mastery. Do I know my story? Am I comfortable in kind of that origin and just, what has shaped me to become who I am? So, yeah, I think that would just be a good reminder to
what's the author of
Kevin Cashman is his name. Yeah. So again, I'm probably too theoretical. I should have thought a little bit about how to survive on a desert island.
It's good. But, I mean, that's why I think it's such an interesting question, because you start talking about these things, you're like, oh well, from different angles, and you see what's going on in your head and so forth. I love it. I think.
Well, no, and it was interesting because I was thinking about okay, so we've done some work in the diversity, equity, inclusion space, and I know that's so politicized now, and I'm like, what was the book that really put me on a trajectory to explore that and be curious about that, want to learn more? And it was that was the prophetic imagination. That wasn't, that was kind of scripture that was focusing on that prophetic voice of it wasn't some pop culture, this is important now. It was, no, this is the right thing to do. Fundamentally to what I believe and my core values is are my choices and decisions impacting things on a broader global scale, and an organization that I'll just throw in there as an added bonus that we've been really involved with for the past 20 years is International Justice Mission, and they're the world's largest anti-trafficking organization. There's a movie out right now. I can't remember what it's called, but everybody's talking about Sound of Freedom, I think is the title of it. It's about this human trafficking.
Yeah, sure.
And people are like, you got to go see it. And I'm like, I've been to Guatemala and met with the director of law enforcement and met with the IJM staff on the ground there who are doing this work day in, day out. This isn't something new to me. We have more people in bonded slavery today than we did during the whole transatlantic trade or slave trade and all that, so this is a moral imperative, things that we need to be paying attention to. And so anyhow, I'll get off my soapbox there, but I just do think these are some of those things that it's how do we get back to the deeper roots of these kinds of things instead of allowing them to kind of stay in this political space that polarizes, and even in the workplace, I think people are I'm seeing a lot of kind of, again, Homer Simpson into the hedge kind of approach of DEI, we tried that and that didn't go so well. Now people are labeled racist. Now people are labeled woke and all these different things. So we're just going to kind of slink back. No, we need to find better ways and creative ways of engaging some of these conversations and realize that we have different perspectives on this and the impact that it has. But we still have to stay engaged.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's great. Interesting stuff. I have never had anybody list any of these 5 books. that I asked people sitting around campfires, when I'm on a camping trip with 8 or 10 guys and we're off in the middle of West Virginia or Minnesota or Alaska or wherever, and at some point I'm well, I have to throw out some question because it gets things going.
Yeah.
Nobody has ever mentioned these 5 books.
Well, again, I'm probably showing a little bit of my, seminary training and theological basis. But again, to me, it's
what makes you tick.
Yeah, and I think it's like you said, we got to get down to some of those core kinds of things. And to me, that's what intrigues me in the work is if we're going to spend 110,000 hours of our lives doing this thing called work, let's be intentional about it. Let's be reflective about it. Let's think about the agent of world benefit that this can be, and think about, there is a profit and a money aspect to this, and I don't think it has to be a both and. I think it can be profitable and can also make a significant impact in the lives of others.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Well, thanks for being such a can-do guy here on our podcast today. We've had some really good combos. I would love to have you come back and talk about some more stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe talk more about practically how to develop leaders. All my clients, that is a huge miss where they don't know it's hard for them. And I'm trying to get them to identify, what does leadership mean?
Mm-hmm.
How's that different from managing?
Yep.
How's that different from holding people accountable?
Yeah.
And build some how-tos around that, or some real practical stuff. So I'd love to get your insight on some of that, and talk about your 5 favorite movies.
Ooh, okay. That's funny. I was just at a cookout the other night, and someone asked, "What's your favorite movie?" And I'm like, I don't know that yeah.
Sure.
I'd have to think deeply about that. It's changed. I used to have like ready answers back in the days when you had to know your favorite sports player, or your favorite athlete, your favorite, in each sport, and you had to know your favorite
albums.
Yeah, your favorite albums.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of like
That's a good one.
That's another one.
Yeah.
I throw out.
Okay.
Top 5 like albums. And it's kind of a generational thing where like, you mean Spotify channels?
Right. Yeah, sure. What's an album? And, no, I always let people know, I grew up in a little bit of a more sheltered environment. So my first like breakthrough into the, secular music was Shaquille O'Neal's rap album.
Oh, wow.
Which, is just lyrical genius. So, if you're looking for something.
That's amazing.
So I was kind of like level set with that to say, like, I'm not the person you want to talk to about really deep, rich music.
Yes.
Like that was my starting point.
That's
so
really funny.
it's pretty much anything's better than that.
William Shatner had a spoken word kind of album.
It's on YouTube.
I heard it on a couple of different stations.
Yeah, but did he use lyrics like "creamy like cheese spread you on my bagel" like Shaq did? I don't know.
Nope. I don't think so.
That is lyrical brilliance. So check it out, everybody.
Wow.
We digress.
Wow.
Well, Shane, pull up our song there. Speaking of lyrical genius,
That's so good.
Great combo, man.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me on, and I hope it's been helpful to those who are listening and engaging.
This is the wrong song. That's kind of cool, though.
Which song is this?
I don't
Sounds
know.
great. This
Modern
Foreigner?
Day.
Pull up some Shaq Diesel, man.
It sounds kind of cool, though.
Is this Foreigner? I don't think it is. Is it it?
Yeah.
Must be new. They're the new guy.
Happy Accident.
What's the when was it? It's got to be
From 1979. It's from their album.
All right. Well, good talking with you, buddy.
Yep, thanks. Appreciate it.
See you later.